biggest games, the best performances, expert analysis. You are Locked On Now.
What's up, everybody? You are listening to Locked On Now, local experts in the biggest stories throughout the NFL. I'm your host, Daniella Bruce, and thank you for making Locked On Now your first listen every single weekday. On today's show, Week 7 of NFC football featured some historic performances and hopefully not too many troubles for your fantasy teams with a season-high 6 teams on the bye this week. It's not every week that we're going to highlight a winless team in our biggest game, but it's also not every week that two quarterbacks that were traded for each other play against each other. So let's find out who got the revenge between the Lions and Rams in LA.
The biggest game.
The Lions did give the LA Rams a bit of a scare on Sunday. They even took a lead in the fourth quarter, but Matt Stafford did beat his former team of 12 seasons in the reunion by throwing for more than 300 yards and 3 scores. Our Locked On Rams host takes a closer look at the win.
The Los Angeles Rams set multiple records in this win over the Detroit Lions in Week 6. I'm Sosa Cremenges, your host of the Locked On Rams podcast. And oddly enough, my biggest takeaway from this game is the Rams need to play cleaner and faster football. A little bit too slow starting the games recently. I think in this contest, the Rams are just way more talented than the Lions. Now, wide receiver Cooper Kupp is the first player in NFL history to have 800 plus receiving yards and 9 plus receiving touchdowns throughout the first 7 weeks of a season. He's on pace to set some franchise records. Matthew Stafford, the quarterback, now has 300 passing touchdowns in his NFL career, the 9th fastest quarterback to get there. And Sean McVay, 42-0 when leading at halftime consecutively. He's now tied with Bill Belichick for the most at halftime. Next week can set the record against the Houston Texans with a win if the Rams are leading at halftime. That's going to do it for this contest. For more on this game, as well as whether or not Sean McVay can set that record going into next week, listen to the Locked On Rams podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
The best performance.
Hold up.
Now, we all know that Tom Brady is the GOAT. He has plenty of records, rewards, trophies, and all of that to prove it. But he hit another milestone on Sunday, believe it or not, by throwing his 600th touchdown pass to Mike Evans, and he finished the day with 4 TD passes. Let's check in with our Locked On Bucs host for more on that stellar performance.
James Yarko here from the Locked On Bucs podcast, talking about the absolute dismantling that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had against the Chicago Bears, winning 38-3. Mike Evans had himself a hat trick of touchdowns. Chris Godwin was the team's leading receiver with over 100 yards and a touchdown, while the team rushed for 182 yards. They also intercepted the ball 3 times against Justin Fields, forced multiple turnovers, absolutely shut down the Chicago Bears offense. It was an absolute show for a team that lost yet another cornerback during the game when Dee Delaney went out with an ankle injury. We also saw Jamel Dean leave the game twice with injuries, so the Buccaneers were basically pulling people out of the stands to come in and play cornerback, but in the end, none of that mattered, because how many touchdown passes did Tom Brady have in the first half? For more on this and all things Tampa Bay Buccaneers, make sure you check out my co-host David Harrison and I 5 days a week on the Locked On Bucs podcast, free and on all platforms, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Atlanta's offense stayed hot after a trip back from London and the bye week off. The Falcons put up 30 points and just barely squeezed by the Dolphins with a last-second field goal. But Locked On Falcons is just as happy for Atlanta to get the W in Miami.
It was another nail-biter in Miami, but the Falcons were able to walk away with a win. I'm Aaron Freeman with Locked On Falcons. It seemed like the Falcons were poised to coast to a relatively easy win after extending a halftime lead to take a 27-14 lead early in the fourth quarter. But if you thought that, then you haven't watched that much Falcons football over the years. So, of course, the Miami Dolphins were able to regain the lead 28-27 with just over 2 minutes to go in the game. But the Falcons, no strangers to blowing leads late, were able to stay the course and engineer a game-winning drive thanks to the newfound connection between veteran quarterback Matt Ryan and rookie tight end Kyle Pitts. Pitts had 2 big catches for a combined 51 yards on that final drive as part of his career-high 163 receiving yards on the day. Kicker Younghoe Koo capped things off by nailing his second game-winning walk-off field goal of the season with a 36-yarder to give Atlanta their third victory of the year by a final score of 30-28. The Falcons' record now moves to 3-3 as they return home to square off against the Carolina Panthers, who dropped their 4th straight game against the New York Giants this past Sunday. For more coverage of this Falcons win, follow Locked On Falcons, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Coming up, we've got more of our Locked On NFL hosts and other NFC games from Week 7. Don't miss out on the action. Locked On Now. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Locked On Now. I'm your host, Daniella Bruce, and thank you for making Locked On Now your first listen every weekday. Now, let's take a look at the rest of the NFC games from Week 7.
Let's go around the league.
Aaron Rodgers has stayed pretty consistent, throwing a touchdown pass in each of the first 3 quarters in the win for Green Bay this week. Locked On Packers has more on the smooth sailing for the Cheeseheads.
The Green Bay Packers came into Sunday's matchup with the Washington football team with the worst red zone defense in the league, a historically bad group. Washington left taking the collar in the red zone, and the Packers get a 24-10 victory. I am Peter Bukowski, host of Locked On Packers, and the big takeaway from this game, the 6th win in a row for the Packers, is the defense. Not only do they keep Washington out of the end zone in 4 red zone trips, they failed to score any points in 4 red zone trips on the Packers. Green Bay added a sack fumble, an interception, and 3 4th down stops, de facto turnovers in this game. Meanwhile, Aaron Rodgers has a marvelous day, 3 touchdown passes as the Packers get another key win as they bank wins ahead of their toughest stretch of the schedule this season.
If you didn't catch much of the Panthers-Giants game on Sunday afternoon, that's because there wasn't much to see, at least for a while. New York led with a score of 5-3 at halftime, but then poured on 20 unanswered in the second half and closed the door on Carolina. Locked On Giants has more on the second win of the season for Daniel Jones and company.
On a day in which the New York Giants were celebrating their corporate sponsorship with Marvel Comics, Big Blue got some heroic performances of their own from both sides of the ball in a 25-3 win over the Carolina Panthers at MetLife Stadium. What's up, everybody? This is Patricia Traina, host of the Locked On Giants podcast. And the Giants got heroic performances from quarterback Daniel Jones, who, channeling his inner Odell Beckham Jr., caught a 16-yard pass from receiver Dante Pettis. That, combined with 203 passing yards and 28 rushing yards, made Jones just the 3rd quarterback in NFL history to record 200-plus passing yards, over 25 rushing yards, and over 15 yards receiving in a game. Defensively, Leonard Williams and Azeez Ojulari contributed 4 of the Giants' season-high 6 sacks against a banged-up Panthers offensive line. And a pair of former Panthers also came up big in their respective contributions to the victory, starting with cornerback James Bradbury, who had a big interception of a Sam Darnold pass to snuff out a scoring drive, and kicker Graham Gano, who contributed 3 field goals of 49, 53, and 44 yards converted. The Giants will next visit the Kansas City Chiefs, losers of a 27-3 drubbing by the Tennessee Titans, a week from Monday for Monday Night Football. Be sure to keep it here on the Locked On Giants podcast for all things New York Giants.
The 49ers came into their primetime Sunday Night Football matchup with the Colts last night with the advantage of the bye week and the urgency of a 2-3 start on the season. But instead, the Colts left Sunday night picking up their 3rd win of the season through the rain in the Bay Area. Locked On Niners tells us what this means for San Francisco as they move forward this season.
The 49ers 2021 season officially in trouble now after a Week 7 loss, 30-18 to the Indianapolis Colts. Hey everybody, I'm Brian Peacock here from Locked On 49ers. It was wet and windy at Levi Stadium in Week 7. The elements got to the 49ers a little bit more than it got to the Colts. It was a couple of late interceptions from Jimmy Garoppolo that sealed it, along with big plays made by the Colts offense, namely Carson Wentz to Michael Pittman Jr., a long touchdown to seal it in the fourth quarter, and the Niners now in trouble. Now they can barely see the Rams and the Cardinals. They're so far out in front now in the NFC West. Niners at 2-4 need to figure something out quickly if they want to get back into this playoff race, and it might be time to find out what they have in rookie number 3 overall draft pick at quarterback, Trey Lance.
The Eagles looked really good through a stretch of their matchup with the Raiders. Philly just didn't get things going until they already found themselves in a 30-7 hole, and the game was just too far out of reach at that point, and that's becoming all too familiar for our Locked On Eagles host, whose team is now 2-5 on the season.
Gino Camilleri here, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast, to bring you the reaction from the Eagles' defeat at the hands of the Las Vegas Raiders at Allegiant Stadium on the road. The Eagles fall 33-22. Don't let this score trick you. It was not an 11-point game. The Eagles went up 7-0 early, but the Raiders never looked back, scoring a ton of points and allowing Derek Carr to finish with one of the highest completion percentages in an NFL game in the history of the league. An all-around bad performance from the Eagles. They could not stop a nosebleed on defense. The Raiders had them death by 1,000 cuts, where they continued to go down that bend, don't break defense. The Philadelphia Eagles offense once again has a terrible stretch in the second and third quarters, not putting up any points until garbage time. This Eagles team needs to take a long, hard look in the mirror, because there is a tough road ahead for the rest of the season. This Eagles team needs to figure out who they are, and fast, or they are going to lose a lot more games. Gino Camilleri here, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Fly, Eagles, fly.
And finally, to wrap things up, nobody really expected the Arizona Cardinals to have any trouble with the Houston Texans on Sunday, and they didn't. They easily improved to 7-0 on the season with a final score of 31-5, and that win is scoregami, if you were wondering. Kyler Murray showed up again, but I'll let our Locked On Cardinals host tell you more about that.
The Arizona Cardinals improved to 7-0. We knew they were probably going to beat the Texans, but they routed the Texans. They won 31-5. Rough first quarter, but from there, the Arizona Cardinals, they turned it on and then put it in cruise control the rest of the game. Just an impressive performance. Zach Ertz enters the equation. Another playmaker for Kyler Murray in this offense, Alex. He had 3 catches, 66 yards, and a big touchdown.
Yeah, put Kyler Murray in an ice bath for the next 96 hours. He's got to get right before Thursday Night Football when the Green Bay Packers come into town. All in all, it was a great day. DeAndre Hopkins got his. That may be my most favorite play call that I've ever seen Cliff Kingsbury call. That sparked DeAndre Hopkins be wide open for a 5 or 6 yard touchdown catch from Kyler Murray. I think the Cardinals look good. 31 points, all in the second through fourth quarter. They shut out an opponent in the second half for consecutive weeks. This defense is legit, and the Cardinals look to be positioning themselves as one of the top seeds in the NFC come playoff.
Yeah, unreal. Obviously defense wins championship. That's the old cliche. But the Arizona Cardinals right now, with the Bills idle on their bye week, Cardinals defense with their performance on Sunday, you're giving up the least amount of points per game in the league, in the NFL. Best in the NFL? We'll see. We're talking about it. Locked On Cardinals on a daily basis. It's Bo and it's Alex.
And that's a wrap for us. Thank you so much for making Locked On Now your first listen every day. And those of you that love to follow your favorite teams, make sure you stay tuned to all of our local Locked On podcasts and all of your great Locked On hosts. I'm Daniella Bruce, and this has been Locked On Now.